So here we go. Here's where the rumor starts. SEGA is rumored to be working on a new Wipeout game for Sony. Bandai Namco is supposedly working on a PlayStation IP as well. It's said that Sony will rely more on third parties and bet less on games as a service going forward. Now, there's 3 statements there, guys. I'm going to come over to Spence first and get your immediate reaction based on those 3 headlines.
Sure, okay. So, the Sega headline, I don't really care. I mean, it's Wipeout. I've never been a fan of Wipeout, never played any of them. I know they're great, just not for me. Especially now I can play GT in VR, so I'm not keen for a new racing game. Bandai Namco is supposed to be working on a PlayStation IP. You know exactly what game that is, baby. Ooh, give it to me. That'd be bang. But other than that, Sony relying more on third parties and betting less on games as a service going forward. I mean, yeah, that's fine, really. I don't see any issue with it. Games as a service are what they are, but it's fine. Let Sony do. I believe in Sony. I think just let Sony do whatever they think is best. Just keep giving me those beautiful games.
Well, you give us a little bit of a hint that you know where Bandai Namco are going, and it's reportedly said, they've come out and they've said this IP will wipe the floor, right? Are they building this up a little bit too much, Spence?
Absolutely not, mate. Absolutely not. They could never prepare you for what they're going to announce. Never.
So, just for the audience's sake, I think we all know what you're meaning here, but what do you mean by this mystery
Bloodborne 2. Bloodborne 2. It's Bloodborne 2. Give us Bloodborne 2, please.
See, I was waiting for that because then I can add that into the search terms. Just say it more, Spence, because we can put it as the caption as well. Bloodborne, new Bloodborne. And it was funny because we released a Bloodborne remake video on the channel. And some of the feedback, everyone was like, clickbait. Oh, you've clickbaited. And it got quite a few views. So maybe we'll clickbait this one as well. So keep saying it, Spence, please.
Well, I'll talk about Bloodborne all day, every day. What a phenomenal game. This is the news. Out of those 3 headlines, this is the one that actually is big to me. This is the one I care about. And it's a rumor. And it's already been rumored for the last, 12 years? Is it going to happen? Probably not. But please. Please.
Okie doke. Well, that's Spencer's view on the 3 headlines. Coming over to Davey. How do you feel about these 3? Well, feel free just to pick one if you want to dive into one a bit more in depth, or if you want to tackle the 3, let's hear it.
I think I'm going to tackle 2. I think I'm going to save the last one because I think it would tie very much into the listener question that we've had submitted. So I'm going to go into the top 2 here we got. So first off, let's go for the big swing of dick here. Let's go for Bloodborne, right? I think at this point it's a fucking guarantee, right? If it's not Bandai Namco, it's Bluepoint. It's one of the 2. And I'll put my fucking money on that. I would put fucking bets on the line that it's either Bluepoint or Bandai Namco themselves. Now, Bandai Namco did it last time. It was obviously PlayStation. It was a second-party relationship, funded by PlayStation, but obviously done in-house, Bandai Namco. So, yeah, why the fuck not? People are dying for it. If Sony are willing to pay a shitload of money and build that close relationship, which they already have with FromSoft, I mean, fuck, they own part of FromSoft anyway. Why not? It makes perfect sense, right? It's money sitting on the floor. And at the moment, they've got to finish off the Elden Ring DLC. But then what happens after that? No one's guess, right? No one knows. Bloodborne time. Fucking Bloodborne time. 100% is. The big question is it a Bloodborne 2 or is it a Bloodborne remake? I think either one of those 2 are valid. Personally, I'd love a number 2. I'd fucking adore a number 2. Am I going to be like cross and spilt my milk? Oh, I can't believe they haven't done it. If it was a remake, no. I'd be fucking over the moon with it. So either one's a win-win for me, and I totally believe that, 100%. Now, the interesting one for me, the one that I'm actually more interested in, is this Sega working on a Wipeout game. Now, that is fucking huge, if that's the case. Now, it would make sense. Studio Liverpool were the guys that did Wipeout before. They closed down a number of years ago. And since their closure, we have not seen Wipeout return. We've had like the HDs and the 4K ports and all this stuff that have brought it over to modern consoles, Wipeout Omega and all this stuff, right? It's been a franchise which has so much fucking potential on the PlayStation 5, and for whatever reason, they haven't jumped on it. Wipeout in VR would be fucking insane. And the work that they've done on like Gran Turismo to bring out like a kind of fully feature complete game, and then to back that up with a fully functioning VR mode, which is probably still one of the best, if not the best in class for the PSVR 2. I imagine that the same could be done with Wipeout. And if there's no studios internally that want to work on the IP, and this is very important, and this is why I think Sony have such a chokehold on the industry outside of Nintendo for being able to put out quality work time and time again. It's because they don't mandate for these things to be done from the studios. The studios go up and pitch their own ideas, and if none of them want to take on that franchise, it makes sense to be able to go out there and say, hey, publishers, we got this IP we want to get shipped. We're happy to fund it. Does anyone want to work on it? And a studio like Sega or a publisher like Sega, huge. And they've had so many chops over the years at the racing genre. Like Sega GT was fucking massive all the way up until its demise at the end of like the Dreamcast. I think there was actually one that came to PlayStation and Xbox maybe? Can't remember. But Sega have chops in this department anyway. They got like, if you want to take it even more to an arcadey level, they got like the Sonic kart races and stuff like that, which is supposedly great. I think there is a great fit for this. A really great fit. Yeah, so ever since they had that close working relationship back on, PS2 when that series was only on PlayStation before, obviously now it's grown in popularity and gone everywhere else, they haven't really had that same bond. So if this is a way to be able to strengthen that up, get them on side, which Sony don't have the same money as Microsoft. They can't be going out and just buying Sega and buying this kind of stuff. They need to build relationships that people just want to work with them. I think this is a great idea. I really do. I'm fucking so in for a new Wipeout. It's way overdue. Give it to me. And if Sega are happy to do it, I'm fucking happy to be along for the ride. I fully believe both of these rumours, 100%. Don't know about yourself, Mr. Hoy.
Well, my 2 cents on this, that if we are going to be getting a new Bloodborne, because guys, I'm a massive fan of this series, I would imagine that we're going to get a remake as opposed to a Bloodborne 2 here. I think that's what we'd be talking about. I think they'd go down the same track as Capcom with the games that cannot be mentioned, which we've talked in depth about in one of our previous rumours. So if you're on the podcast, well done for listening to the second rumour. If you're not on the podcast, make sure you go back and check that out. They're going to be in a situation where they're testing the water. People on Twitter have always been screaming out for Bloodborne, any Bloodborne. Remake it, number 2, whatever, just give us more Bloodborne. People are out there. They know the fans are there. But do they know that translate into the money? Because it's all about that dollar, baby. And the way to prove that to your shareholders, to the board, to the managers, to the directors, is you go through the process of doing a remake and guaranteeing that when they put that effort in for Bloodborne 2, the buyers are out there. And that's where I believe that one will go. But much like you, Davey, out of the 3, the Wipeout one excites me a lot. And it confuses me slightly with the Sega ties. Now, I know Wipeout did launch on some of the Sega consoles as well as PlayStation originally. I think some of the original ones were over there on the maybe Dreamcast or Saturn at the time. I'm reading on Wikipedia, so it must be right. But it's weird not to have Wipeout on the PS5. It really is. We've got a PlayStation console without Wipeout. That feels strange. That seems foreign to me. Now, we haven't had a Wipeout game since the Omega Collection on 2017, or if you count the iOS game, I'm not sure if you do. So it's been enough time. And for someone like Sega to pick this up, I think it's a match made in heaven. If they can make this game and make it sing to the same level that we expect on PlayStation 5 and utilize the graphics power that's out there, and I've just bought a new TV. This would look absolutely stunning if they can get their shit together. And that's what I hope with this one.
the thing about it is, you're right in terms of being this graphical powerhouse. On the PS3, when Wipeout came out, it was easily the best looking game on the console at the time it released. It was absolutely insane. I remember that you could just import custom songs into it. And so I was playing, like, I think the Soulja Boy album had just come out at that time. And I imported that album, and so many nights around mine on like a Thursday night, we just played Wipeout. We absolutely sweated the fuck out of it. Just listened to the Soulja Boy EP. Just on repeat for like fucking multiple years. It was wild. And it was absolutely sick. It was such a good game, and it was so fucking far ahead that whenever they've done these revisions and these reports to it, they haven't had to do an awful lot, because it always just looked absolutely insane. So this could be the thing that really shows off what the PS5 is truly capable of in a racing setting. And holy hell, can you imagine how quick you'd be able to move? And you'd be able to fly around. And these things already go like, hundreds and hundreds of miles an hour. They could just make that speed feel so sick. And I can't imagine how good it would be to double tap for the boost to be able to take the corners quickly with adaptive fucking controls and adaptive triggers. Oh, man. It's crying out for it. It's crying out for it. Please, God, make this come to reality. Please, God.
You've got to miss those days where you could load your own songs into games, haven't you? Because we had a lot of fun with that in the PS3 era, didn't we? Having our custom soundtrack for games, playing along. It just encouraged you to play more. And now you have to have it playing off some other device, unfortunately. But you are right. I think this game, as I've said, it's the perfect title to really push the PS5, both graphically and, yes, as you've said, Davey, with that haptic feedback and all the different features that we have now on the DualSense Edge. Let's push this into the future. Let's really see what the PS5 can do. And if Sega can do it, I think that's a big wow moment, isn't it? To have Sega attached to that. They've come into PlayStation and they wowed everybody. That would set Sega up then for the future of development on Sony's platform. How do you feel about this one, Spence? Because you've been a bit quiet on this.
Yeah, I'm just not a Wipeout guy. I mean, great for Sega and everything. Yeah, nice. And I know that Wipeout is a beautiful game, so I would be keen to see it. But it's just not something that interests me. I'm not sure why. It's a proper arcade racer kind of thing. It's great. But I don't know. I'm not much of a driving game player anyway. And I've got enough of my freaking my £700 Gran Turismo setup I got in my room that I never use. I don't need racing games. Sega doing it, cool, great. They have the props, they have the talent, they could do it. And I'm sure it'll be stunning. But then they also made Sonic Frontiers, which looks like dog ass, and that was only a few months ago. So just give it to a different team. But then yeah, sound. But I don't care for it at all. I think it's probably true.
You can't win them all. Right. There's a third one that we haven't tackled here, Davey. Obviously, Spencer's given his top-level thoughts on that, but we'll revisit it because I'm going to mould this in now with a listener question from the hot dog himself, Lurian, over on Twitter. Our biggest fan. He always tweets in and provides epic questions for us to answer, and he hasn't disappointed with this one. He's kept it really short, which we appreciate, Lurian. You listened and you've delivered. Let's hit that jingle.
There once was a show some time ago that asked 4 questions every fortnight or so. It became so rare they weren't prepared to have a verse or rhyme. Oh God, I'm scrambling now to get a word that rhymes, so how can I wrap this up? I'll take this mail and go.
Absolute banger. We need more listener questions. I want to encourage every single one of you next week to listen to this show over the period of the 2 weeks that we leave and start emailing in your questions, because I want to hear that every week, because it's never going to get old. Looking into the future, Phil says it gets old, so we change it. But at the moment, I am absolutely loving that tune. So please, listeners, send us in your questions for the next show, pswetrust@gmail.com, or of course, hit us up over on the Twitter. So over to the hot dog himself, Lurian. Here is his question, and I'm going to read it verbatim. There is an unhealthy amount of negativity and pessimism around Sony's live service ambitions. Lovely big words. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? MLB and GT are great. We've literally seen nothing else from any other game, all judged on rumours and speculation. Now, is this really justified? Now, Spencer, I know you've had your say, your initial thoughts on the third line of this epic rumour. Now, do you want to come back and give us a bit of a rebuttal based around what Lurian is saying here?
I don't have any... I don't really have a rebuttal for Lurian. I kind of agree. But it's also just a case of... It is an unhealthy amount of negativity and pessimism, sure. But you get that for every video game ever. It's not just specifically to Sony's live service games or anything. It's whatever comes out by whoever gives it to us. There's so much hate in the world. So much. And we should all just love each other. Love everything except Exoprimal. And that is it. That's all we can do and ask for. It's just, I don't think this is anything that's specific to PlayStation's live service. But it's, I do agree with him. It's definitely unneeded.
I've got to love that you dropped the Exoprimal in there. You're being so lovey. You're being so hippie. And bringing this, into the past of love. And then you dropped Exoprimal and I immediately hated you. Anyway, let's move this on. Davey, what are you saying, mate?
I think Lurian's onto something here, saying there's an unhealthy amount of negativity and pessimism around Sony's live service ambitions. All I would say to Lurian is to temper it a little bit, because I think that's the same for any live service game. I know our reaction whenever someone mentions live service, our eyes roll, right? We're like, oh, here we fucking go again. Why are you entering this space when you're competing with Warzone and Apex and all these big hitters? And I think that's probably the case for the collective vision, right? And people get worried and they say things like, oh, well, if they're working on live service, they're not going to be giving us our amazing single-player games. Well, Sony have already come out and said that they are. So I am much the same as yourself, Lorene, in that I am not worried at all about these live service games. I'm really not. You look at Sony's track record over the... ever since PS3, really, we don't really seem to miss on a fucking Sony published game. Like, very rare. Like, I can think of, since PS4, if we take it to there, Knack and Dreams. And that's really about it in terms of, first-party games. There's the odd one or two, but never, the difference between a great one and a shit one, the rating is very much in the great camp. Absolutely, stacked up there. I think, unfortunately, what happens is, though, Lurian, is that people don't think about things with a logical brain, right? All they do is they go on Twitter, they see the first thing they see, and they have just a guttural reaction without giving it a second thought. And they just type out those characters, chuck it up, and it's there. And then all that happens then is just builds and builds and builds. And you get all these people that have a smooth brain as fuck, and they just cannot see the wood for the trees. And they just put out their bullshit opinion. And that's all it is. Remember, what you're seeing online is generally the vocal minority. That seems to be the case. Because the people who feel differently, you just scroll past it. You think, oh, that's bullshit, I won't even bother. And that's it. Because it takes effort to do that. And those kind of smooth brain people that feel like that and can really just narrow it down to being live service equals bad, and Sony don't know what they're doing, don't really take into account that Sony at the moment, and I think this is a true thing to level at Sony, is that we're pigeonholed at the moment in terms of being a single player focused business. And I think that's kind of irrefutable at this point. And now I'm not saying they're all third persons and all that, because that's bullshit, right? There's loads of different examples where that isn't the case. And even when they are third person action games, they're all drastically different from each other, so they cannot be compared. You can't compare Ghost of Tsushima to Spider-Man 2, right? You just can't. And comparing that to The Last of Us, it just doesn't work that way, right? Or to Uncharted or God of War. They're all very different. Or Horizon. They're all different in how they do their games. And sure, the camera system may be similar, I guess, But that's the only link they have, right? I think that you've mentioned MLB and GT, right? MLB, would you class that as a live service game, Loreen? I don't know if I would. I mean, it's like saying it's FIFA live service, I guess, right? But it's also just an annual release sports game. So I don't know. GT is a great example, though. Gran Turismo, they have been doing so much work. A huge update just went out now, adding AI into the game. In this Sophie AI they've added in, which completely revolutionizes the way that you can play Gran Turismo. It learns from you and will continually try and level you up by providing opponents that know how good you are. And so as you play the game, the better you get, it won't be like an arbitrary kind of difficulty system or anything like that. It just knows your level that you're playing at and will try and match that to be able to challenge you to get better. So instead of you having to rely on ghost data when you do a lap time, you've got AI kind of helping you along that path, which is fucking incredible. It opens the doors to so many different ways that game will change. And with the updates we've already seen them do with GT, adding in VR, adding in all these extra courses, we got new snowy maps that have just gone up today, all this stuff, GT are fucking killing it. And I know they came out the gate and they kind of spluttered, if you want to use an engine term, with the amount of kind of how much cost there is to be able to buy some of these more expensive cars. But it was kind of by design, because it's a game that you want to be playing for years. It kind of makes sense, right? Like, why would you want to split your load and be able to buy like the top level McLaren month 1 if they expect you to keep on playing this game for the next 3 years, right? It makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense. I can't go on to Apex Legends now and buy the best skin in the game with my 10 hours. I need to play for 300 hours before I buy that. That's just the reality of it. And I can pay and I can cheat that if I want to. But that's the way it is. And people will then say things like, oh, but GT is a paid for game. It should have all content included. Yes, it is. But the content you get for that like 70 quid investment is way more than you can ever need. I've put like a decent amount of hours, not loads, probably about like only 10 or so hours into it, and just been doing the licenses and the main story. And that content's fucking high tier as fuck. There's so much there. There's so much history. There's so much love and compassion that's been put into this game. You can see how much they adore cars in Polyphony. And I don't feel for a second that I've been kind of ripped off here with that. And I think GT is the only example we have so far of that. I think when we get to Fair Games and we get to some of these other known and talked about and kind of announced already live service games, if they come out the gate and they hit, no one will say shit about it anymore. The same way that Sony release and they say, oh, we're releasing a new single player game. No one's like, oh God, where are we going with this? It's not like we are whenever Xbox announced a new single player game and you think, well, we'll fucking wait and see. Right? Because they haven't built up that street cred for it. I think this is a short-term problem that isn't even a problem. I think you're too busy focusing on the Twitter minority and not how the majority of PlayStation owners feel. I think most people just have a certain level of confidence now in the studio and the publisher that they won't put it out for shit. They just won't. They'd rather just reinvest the time or cancel the project. So I wouldn't worry about it. I really wouldn't. I don't know how you're feeling about this one, Mr. Hoy.
Well, if you've managed to make it through David's monologue, here's what I think. So live service, I think, is such a kind of swear word these days, isn't it? There's a lot of negativity around live service. It's a bit like Battle Royale was for a little bit, loot boxes, or those stupid monkeys that people bought. And I believe that they associate that kind of negativity with it because it's all down to money, isn't it? They think it's just a way for Sony to penny pinch, charge you out the wazoo for a game you really dedicated to and you've got sucked into and you want that next thing, whatever that next thing is. And you hear people going wild on Twitter about, oh, a live service, I'm not touching that, I'm not going to play it. But as 99% of those people out there on Twitter actually played these games? I'm probably going to say no, because there's a lot of quality out there when it comes to live services games. I know there's not loads of them out there for PlayStation, but in general, live service games, there's a plethora of absolutely spectacular experiences. Now, for me, live service is generally, and I'm saying generally because PlayStation sometimes charge you a bit more, it's a cheaper way to get a great experience. And it can last longer than those 25 hours that you paid £60 or £70 for Spider-Man 2. It's a way of prolonging that game and giving you a little bit more content. Bang for your buck. If you don't want to buy the gold skin with the diamond eyes, you don't have to. Just forget about it. Who cares? As long as these upgrades are only vanity in my eyes and not game breaking, I'm down. And I think that's where developers have made issues for themselves, rods for their own backs in the past, where they've put things into games where people can buy and you're automatically overpowered and ruins it. But just remember, when people are spending money in a game that can last years, they should be reinvesting that back into the game to give you new functionality, to give you new seasons, to give you new things to go out and do, if they're doing it right. Which hopefully they do!